I love you a lot. I know you know that already, but so I said goodbye at the queer retreat to a lot of people, and it didn't feel that emotional, but maybe because this is more intimate or for whatever reason, a different space, I'm feeling it more. How big it is for me to say goodbye in this way, in this format, in this way. And then one other thing, because it feels so like, it's funny to use the word pertinent. It's a word my mom used a lot. Feels very English. I hardly hear Americans say pertinent, but somehow my mom is coming through because I'm thinking of Ruth, and so it feels very pertinent to bring her name and her being as my teacher into the room tonight and to honor her more formally. For all her courage to find her path as a female lay teacher, one of the first. She whacked those bushes in the jungle of heterosexism and sexism, because she was straight but not, but a little unstraight. So, and then in the lineage of teaching, it feels somehow karmic, or it feels asking for recognition that like 3 years ago, I invited you to be the guiding teacher at Dharma. Was it 3 years ago?
Was it 3 already?
Or
I don't know.
whenever, 2 or 3 years ago, and then I really haven't seen Mel because she's been on her journey, and then it felt right to invite her again, and there's something about that in the ending and some new beginning, but we don't quite know how it'll manifest, of Mel coming in a little more to teach. Yeah. So that feels beautiful to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And okay, can I start?
Sure.
So sometimes you've heard me quote Sheila Rowbotham. She was such a deep inspiration for me. She was a socialist and a feminist, taught at Oxford University, and was one of the first women to write really an incredibly radical book on what it's called Woman's Consciousness, Man's World, and she came up with ideas that people are coming up 15, 20 years later with. And in it there was a paragraph where she said, we find ourselves looking at mirrors as though in a fairground, where the image reflected back is so distorted. And I don't know if any of you have been to those old fairs where you go into a tent and there are all these different mirrors and you see yourself very elongated or very wide or very short. And she said, that's what, capitalism and oppression do, is they reflect back to you yourself in deeply distorted ways. And we a little bit have been talking about that. And when, without any countervailing force, then we accept those images into ourselves as real images. And one of the most amazing and beautiful things about being together in practice is that without even saying anything to each other, we're reflecting back to each other our beauty, because we see the efforts we're making, and we experiencing each other's kindness and generosity in all the unspoken gestures that we are communicating. And I feel personally that I am the inheritor of so much of your beautiful energies, because in the interviews and through the years, I've received so much of the beautiful energies that live inside of you. And I feel like, not to be a broken record, but that so much of our practice is our willingness to receive back that reflection that you offer. And that's what I feel like we do a little bit, is to offer back to you the reflection of what you already are. And that's what the Buddha said in a way to me when he said, be a light unto yourself, is that he was saying, you already are the path that you're walking. And if you weren't, then there wouldn't be any point in walking the path, right? It's just, it includes more support and more strengthening sometimes, and more letting go, and I don't want to say more, that it includes calling in more support and letting go and renunciation, and the ground of our being is already there, that has already in many ways been perfected by you. Otherwise you wouldn't be here walking the path that you have. And I'm saying this particularly to acknowledge that when we did the appreciative joy practice, that in naming those beautiful energies, it lifts up those distorted images that we've taken in about ourselves. So when some of you said, I just feel shame, or I feel judgment, then it makes sense that that is what comes up. The practice that we're doing is the practice of beginning, even if it's conceptual and intellectual, to begin to know what our true reality is and what the habitual, distorted images and communications have been that we have taken to be ourselves. To discern that truth. That discernment is the difference between being on the path and not being on the path. When Mel so beautifully talked about being on the boat that takes us to the furthest shore, it's that capacity to discern what is true and what liberates me from suffering, and what is the suffering that I have believed is my birthright, but actually isn't true. And it takes a leap. It does take a leap of faith to be willing to feel so vulnerable. To know that we're beautiful. So I wanted to offer you, and some of you have heard this before, but I wanted to offer you a particular framework that has helped me to make this choice over and over again about my suffering or my liberation. And it's a framework and conceptual. But there's something about it that points to the truth that is so beautiful, that has touched me. So it's about the nature of consciousness. And for those of you who might have forgotten or haven't heard this before, excuse me, I had this very intense allergic reaction to that test, and I went to Mel. I said, "Can you needle me, Mel, because I feel so nauseous." So now I'm just going to burp. I don't feel so nauseous.
Time too. It's
did?
never happened with anyone else I've given acupuncture to, but both times with you afterwards.
I'm like burping and burping and burping. It's great, but I just want you to know. So the Buddha said there wasn't an eternal soul living inside of us. So what is happening then? What is happening is that we have moments of consciousness arising and passing, like this is an image that I love. Have you gone to a playground where they have a kids' fountain, and so it's like shoots up water here and shoots up water there and shoots up water here? That's moments of consciousness coming and going, coming and going, coming and going, super quickly, like in thousandths of a second, up and down and up and down. And then how do they manifest? They manifest these moments of consciousness through 6 gateways, or our 6 sense spaces. So when an image comes into a visual field, in that minuscule instant, I consciousness arises. When I'm reading a book and there's I consciousness happening, there might be someone slamming the door, but I don't hear it. So there's only one sense space at a time, and they can be like going very quickly. Sound, sight. So sound through the ear is another sense space where consciousness arises and passes. Whenever a sound comes into the hearing field, consciousness arises at the immediate moment of contact with the sound. And the same with taste and the tongue. As soon as we turn to feel right, like right now, oh, what is the tongue tasting? Like the taste of your saliva or some slight lingering of dinner tonight. In that moment of tasting, that's taste consciousness arising. So what other forms of consciousness are there? Sight, hearing, taste, smell. As soon as something arises, you're just in a bus going down the main, not alleyway, what's the word? Whatever it is. The avenue in the bus. Yeah, right. Down the avenue in the bus. And you're like, you catch a smell, you know, oh, laundry detergent. That's me, like so sensitive to that perfume of laundry. That's contact coming in, and it dominates the field. I was looking at where I was going, but then this instant the smell takes precedent, and then seeing does again. So you get this idea. There are two more consciousnesses that we can include. Touch, exactly, touch consciousness, and mind consciousness. Yes, yes. So those are the 6 sense bases. So this is radical. It's a radical map. Instead of naming reality as some eternal spirit living inside of us, we have these moments of consciousness coming and going and coming and going all the time. And that's what's happening. In each moment of consciousness, then, there is contact. There is the experience of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It bears taking a moment to really grok that in every moment of consciousness, it's either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So our world is constantly flavored by the sense base of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Just because later it's very important to come back to that. And then there's perception. For every experience, when we perceive it, our memory comes to mark it according to the characteristics with a label. So, tree, and it takes the particular characteristics, trunk, branch, leaves, and names the tree. So perception. Then we can see how perception can be easily constructed according to the culture we live in. Like, how do we recognize tree or gender, right? For example, like how do we perceive it? How are we marking it? And who has taught us how to mark it and label it? So perception being a really important part of how we perceive the world. And then volition. In each moment of consciousness, there's an intention. We're not always aware of it, but there is always an intention. Isn't that mind-blowing? Every moment of consciousness, there's an intention. And then there's some basic one-pointedness. Like, I'm going down the avenue in the bus, and I'm able to pay enough attention and be concentrated on where I'm going that I can reach the back of the bus, right? So a basic one-pointedness, and then a basic form of attention. I'm paying enough attention to walk and get to the back of the bus. That attention isn't mindfulness. These 7 qualities are in every moment of consciousness until we die. Then there are either the 14 unwholesome energies or the 25 beautiful energies. So when I believe that I'm inadequate, this is what's going on. There is always delusion present in my mind, or ignorance, which is the mental factor that obscures reality. And in that obscuration, it obscures our beautiful beingness. And in that obscuration comes then, because it brings disconnection and separation, along with it all those energies that we know so well. Inadequacy, insufficiency, separation, isolation, homelessness, rootless, feeling rootless, not belonging.
Ill will.
Yes, I'm coming to that. Very good. So that is the general condition. That's the environment that is happening every time we're not in a wholesome energy. This is what's happening. So there's delusion, there is shamelessness, which means that we're not scared to harm ourselves. And there's and the other one is fearlessness, where we're not scared to harm another. Because anyway, just to and then there's restlessness. The mind is unsettled. It's like, jumping, just jumping. In those four energies are there in any moment when there isn't a wholesome energy. These four energies are always there. In this ground of being, then, the psychological experiences, insufficiency, inadequacy, not good enough, homeless, rootless, not being able to discern clearly, not being scared of harming, being the sort of very fundamental anxiety or inability to settle enough to discern anything, in that environment, then comes the movement to try and anchor, to escape into something and anchor into it. And that's the movement of greed, craving, clinging, wanting, and desire. And so, no blame or shame then, right? Because this is not a personal problem. This is for every human being alive. For every consciousness alive, this is going on. So then there's this movement to anchor into something and to make ourselves something. And we take the material that's given to us in this environment to build something that feels certain, anchored, me, mine. Otherwise, how do I explain everything? Sort of. Because it's not so conscious. So it's, I don't know if you've watched a bird build a nest where you're living, but they take whatever's around, bits of cotton, old bits of cloth that never made it into the garbage can, twigs, the cottony stuff of some of those cottony plants, like twigs, whatever is around them they take. Hair, yes, bits of hair. We do the same thing. Whatever is around us, we take to build through clinging, holding, attachment, and identification to root ourselves, our sense of self. At the same time, there's the clinging. Sometimes there's also the movement to protect what we have then, because it's all we have. There's aversion, fear, anger, revenge, any form of violence, of hurting. So hatred. Then there's also, the Buddha names just some of these: envy, avarice, worry, sloth, torpor, and doubt. Those are just a few of them. There are many more, really, that that he doesn't mention in here, like conceit. That's a really like comparing mind. That's like to try and define ourselves, comparing mind. And if we've taken the energies of you're not good enough, like, which is the very root of delusion, and then let's say you have teachers who reprimand you and belittle you, which I went to an Afrikaner school. I think I mentioned that when I made a mistake, particularly me, I don't know why, I was called to the front of the room, and this teacher had this big ruler like this, and he would make me bend down and hit me in front of everyone. So, you know, I mentioned on my first Dharma talk about feeling shame. That's the conditioning. I made mistakes and I was called to the front of the room and hit. So we take that message then, right? Because when we receive delusion, an action from delusion, when we receive that aversion or hatred and ignorance, it triggers our own. So we're taking in that message, our own is triggered, and we take it in because we have been constructed to receive. We are vulnerable, so vulnerable. And so we build these identities up from that. No, this is every human being. Each one of us, in our own way. When we name it this way, isn't it like a miracle we're alive? How amazing we are that we've survived that. I mean, I know some of us have gone through more of those types of experiences than others, but all of us have gone through something like that because this is our world. And so I am in awe of us that nevertheless, there also is living in us these beautiful qualities and energies. And you might not realize it, but the very first of the beautiful energies is faith. That inside of every one of us, whenever there is a moment to care, to be generous, to be considerate, to just take a moment and like, oh, what do I think? Like there's always faith there. This energy that is described as the hand that grasps what is the profitable or healing or transformative. The hand that places us on that boat that is crossing to the other shore. It's faith. And along with faith is mindfulness, because as I mentioned the other day, mindfulness is the other leader of all the other beautiful qualities. So it's mindfulness and faith together, and then they bring everything else. So metta, loving kindness, caring, being concerned, empathic, compassionate, feeling joy, investigation, effort, energy, concentration, equanimity, a mental pliancy, the strength or rectitude of ethical living. And then the Eightfold Path, right speech, right action, right livelihood, wisdom, tranquility, And the Buddha, so anyway, the Buddha specifically says generosity is non-greed, and that general wish for the well-being of others is non-hatred. So there are 25 of those. So when Mel spoke about, we can go a little late because we're sitting to midnight. So when Mel mentioned about the really grokking how to begin to create the conditions of a new world, of freedom and liberation, of awakening, of nirvana, then we understand the dynamic of what's happening in consciousness, and the fulcrum in that consciousness is what our intention is. And what our intention is moved by our mindfulness and our faith. So in any moment we can change from this one movement of ignorance, insufficiency, greed, hatred, identity, defense, and revenge, and ownership, protection in defense. We can move from that to this through the power of intention. That is the bridge. And that it is lawful. That's what Mel was saying. It's lawful. Any wholesome intention has a law, which is that it will bring good results. So then I want to just go back. I want to go back and say, I don't quite understand how this goes, so I'm not quite sure. The patterning of these mental qualities, it seems, gets laid down in our DNA, that our DNA changes generationally, and it gets laid down. And so as each of us inherits the generational patterning of our parents and of their parents and of their parents, each of us, this is my way into equanimity, each of us receives that DNA, that patterning. If when it's passed through the unwholesome energies, and so we experience that inheritance in the environment of shame and blame. That's how we inherit it. We think that when we feel shame at some of our particular, quote, failings, that it's because there's something wrong with us. But it isn't. It's how ignorance is constructed and how it's constructed in our DNA that those go together. That any time that it is unwholesome, there is always this quality of shame and blame and judgment. That is how it's locked into place. So it's not personal. That's the link to equanimity is that it's not personal. Each one of us are experiencing the same thing. It has a different expression, but we're all experiencing this together. And so, do you remember that there was this man called John Bradshaw who was quite famous in the 12-step program?
Huh?
The inner child.
Yeah, the inner child. It was like beautiful. And he gave this image of someone in the water holding on to this very heavy weight and sort of drowning and really struggling, just coming up for enough air and drowning again. And then a boat comes by and says, "Hey, can we help you?" And the person is like, "No, this is mine." That's us. So that is us. That somehow we identify with the shame, and so we are scared to say to each other, "This is what I'm carrying." And then, this is my take. So, I have inherited, the trauma of sexual abuse in my family, and I spent many, many years really trying to kill myself because I didn't know how to carry that. And I came to the Dharma, and then it's become reframed as my greatest gift I can give to my parents is to receive what I've been given and to heal it. Because by healing it, I'm ending the cycle. I'm changing the DNA. And so of course, sometimes it takes tremendous amount of energy. I'm not picking up rocks and taking them to the other side of the road, but I am like sitting in front of my altar, rattling away with songs, calling in this wish to hold what I've been given with love, because I know that's the great healer. And I am unwavering in my understanding of and faith, as I know you are, that the wounding is never healed by more wounding, by more shame and blame, but by love and presence. I don't actually have the expectation that this wounding would be fully healed by the time I die. Sometimes when it's one wounding on top of another, it feels like for some of us at least the fabric is torn enough that it isn't ever fully sewn back together. But how that torn fabric is held has totally changed. Because often I feel beautiful, even with the torn fabric. And that's where equanimity is in that grace of holding what is torn So if I hope through my own struggles and sharing so intimately that I have communicated with you the transformative power and capacity to hold with grace what we've been given, to heal it, to know that the healing process is what is, it strengthens us and makes us beautiful. And and at the same time that is living inside of us, that miraculously there is the power of the mind to open. So I know that I went with the movement because this is my last Dharma talk. And I'm wondering if we can, in our evening, a little later, have your Dharma talk on equanimity.
Sure.
So, because we certainly will have enough time to have another talk later on in the evening. So it might be that because we've been sitting for over 45 minutes, what do you think about that? Is time or do you have the energy to hear another? No, we'll stop. No, okay.
I'm not going to follow that.
Okay, great. So then let me end with one of my favorite poems from my favorite poets, Joy Harger. And this is from the poem For Calling the Spirit Back from Wandering the Earth in Its Human Feet. I love that title.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. For calling the spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath, offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way through, though there might be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plants. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in the corners of time or the creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces and tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it has bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark. I want to get this right. I can't get